Billionaire had everything but happiness. Fun till her smile and cooking changed everything, lurid. Jones stared out over the sparkling spread of Manhattan from the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, the lights of the city shimmering like an endless constellation. On paper, his life was perfect. CEO of a multi-billion-dollar real estate empire, owner of 3 estates scattered across the globe, and winner of more awards than he could remember. The magazines called him the golden boy of New York business. Investors called him brilliant. Strangers called him lucky, but Roland just felt tired. The penthouse was spotless, sleek, and modern, every piece of art chosen by a designer. Yet the silence inside pressed against him. A cold reminder that he lived here alone. He had assistants, advisors, and acquaintances, hundreds of people who answered his calls instantly, but not a single person whose company he genuinely wanted when the world went quiet. Dinner tonight had been prepared by a celebrity chef his personal assistant had booked weeks in advance. The plate looked like something from a museum. 3 delicate ribbons of lamb, a drizzle of sauce painted like brush strokes, tiny greens scattered like confetti. It was beautiful. It was perfect. It was utterly soulless. He pushed the plate away. What he really wanted was something that didn't taste like it had been made in a lab for Instagram likes. Something warm, hearty, real. Something like his mother used to make before she passed away. Fried chicken so crispy it crunched between your teeth. Sweet cornbread with melted butter pooling in the cracks. Peach pie that made the whole house smell like summer. The ache of that memory sat heavy in his chest. The next morning, Roland had a scheduled trip to inspect a property purchase in upstate New York. It was the kind of deal that would earn him millions, but the thought didn't excite him. Numbers had stopped thrilling him years ago. Still, he got in his chauffeur car and gave the driver the usual clipped instructions. A few hours into the drive, the traffic on the main highway stopped into a standstill. Impatient, Roland ordered the driver to take a side road. The narrow country lanes wound through rolling hills, dotted with red barns and farmhouses. It was quieter out here, the kind of quiet that made you hear your own thoughts. About 30 minutes later, his stomach reminded him that he'd skipped breakfast. Just as he was about to tell the driver to find somewhere to stop, he spotted it. A small weather-worn diner on the side of the road. The paint on the wooden siding had faded to a soft gray, and the sign above the door was chipped, but the words painted across it were bold. Myers Place, best peach pie in the state. Roland almost told the driver to keep going. He hadn't stepped into a place like this in, well, decades, but something about the warm glow spilling through the windows drew him in. "I'll be quick," he told his driver, stepping out into the crisp air. The bell above the door jingled as he entered. The inside smelled like heaven, like butter, sugar, and something frying in the kitchen. Vinyl booths lined the walls, and a handful of locals sat sipping coffee and chatting as if they'd known each other their whole lives. Behind the counter stood the woman from the sign. She was in her late 30s, her skin a rich, deep brown that glowed under the warm light, her hair pulled back in a neat bun with a few curls escaping to frame her face. She wore a flour-dusted apron over a soft blue shirt. And when she looked up and caught Roland's eye, her smile lit the whole room. "Take a seat anywhere, honey," she called, her voice rich and warm. Roland slid into a booth near the window. Within moments she was there, holding a small notepad. "You look like you've been driving a while," she said. "What can I get you?" He scanned the menu. It was simple. Handwritten in looping letters. No fancy descriptions. No foreign words meant to impress. "I'll have the fried chicken plate," he said, almost surprising himself, "and a slice of peach pie and coffee." "Good choice," she said with a wink. "That's my mama's recipe. You're in for a treat." When she left, Roland found himself watching her work. She greeted every customer by name, remembered their usual orders, and laughed at their jokes. A man at the counter complained about the weather, and she poured him another cup of coffee without asking. When a young boy dropped his spoon, she brought him a new one along with a cookie on the house. When his food arrived, it was nothing short of glorious. The fried chicken was golden and crisp, steam curling from the meat as he broke into it. The collard greens were tender and savory, the cornbread sweet and buttery, and the peach pie. The first bite nearly undid him. The peaches were soft but not mushy. The filling sweet with a hint of cinnamon. The crust flaky and perfect. It was like being taken back to his childhood kitchen. His mother humming to herself as she worked. "This is incredible," he said when she stopped by to refill his coffee. Glad you like it, she said, her eyes crinkling at the corners. I just cook with love. That's the secret. For some reason, those words landed heavily with him. He'd spent years in boardrooms where every move was calculated for profit. Love never factored into the equation. When he finished his meal, Roland stayed a little too long. He found himself wanting to keep her talking, wanting to know how she ended up here, what her life was like, what made her smile like that. But there was a strange vulnerability in the urge, and he wasn't used to feeling vulnerable. Finally, he paid in cash, leaving a tip far larger than she probably expected. As he stepped outside, he glanced back through the diner's window. She was laughing with another customer, sunlight streaming across her face. The image stayed with him for the rest of the day. And for reasons he couldn't yet explain, he knew this wouldn't be the last time he stopped at Maya's place. Roland told himself it was coincidence the first time he came back. 2 weeks had passed since that unexpected stop at Maya's place, and he'd been restless ever since. He told his assistant he needed to check on another upstate property, and gave his driver the route he'd memorized after that first visit. When the diner's weathered sign came into view, a faint, ridiculous thrill went through him. He told himself it wasn't about her, it was about the food. But the moment he stepped inside and saw her behind the counter laughing with a regular, he knew that was a lie. Back again, huh? Maya said when she spotted him. I suppose I am, he said, sliding into the same booth. The fried chicken's fault, really. And the pie? She gave him a knowing smile. Coffee, please. That became a pattern. Once a week, sometimes twice, Roland found himself making excuses to head upstate. At first he ordered the same thing every time, but eventually he began exploring the menu. Maya's gumbo on Wednesdays, her smothered pork chops on Fridays, biscuits so fluffy they practically floated off the plate. But it wasn't just the food that drew him in. It was her. He noticed how she greeted everyone the same way, whether they were wearing a tailored suit or oil-stained overalls, how she made space for the lonely man who sat in the corner nursing coffee for hours, how she always kept a small plate ready for a wiry veteran named Gus, who paid with crumpled bills and sometimes not at all. One rainy afternoon, Roland arrived to find the diner quieter than usual. The sky was a dull, heavy grey, the kind of weather that made the world feel small and muted. You're here earlier than usual, Maya said, bringing his coffee. Had business nearby? He lied easily. Figured I'd stop in before heading back. She leaned on the counter for a moment, watching him. You always wear a suit. What kind of business you in? Real estate, he said. Technically true. He left out the part about being one of the most powerful men in the industry. Mostly investments. Real estate, huh? She said, arching a brow. I can't imagine there's much of that going on around here. Not the kind I usually deal with, he said. But maybe that's a good thing. Maya chuckled and went back to the kitchen. He noticed how she carried herself, shoulders back, chin lifted, but with an ease that made people comfortable around her. Later that week, Roland came by just before closing. The last customer left with a wave, and Maya began stacking chairs. Let me help with those, Roland offered. You don't have to, she began, but he was already lifting a chair. Well, so look at that. Mr. Real Estate knows how to work. I do own my arms, he said with a smirk. When they finished, she disappeared into the back and returned carrying 2 heavy 50 lb bags of flour. He frowned. You carry those yourself? Who else is going to do it? Give them here. He took the bags easily, following her into the kitchen. It was smaller than he expected, but warm and full of life. Spices lined up in glass jars, cast iron skillets blackened from years of use. A handwritten recipe book open on the counter. That's my mama's, Maya said, noticing his gaze on the book. Every recipe I use came from her. She taught me to cook in this very kitchen. Roland traced a finger over the smudged, flour-dusted pages. The handwriting was looping and uneven. The ink faded in places. She must have loved it here. She did, Maya said softly. She used to say feeding people was her way of loving them. I guess I picked that up from her. They talked for nearly an hour in that kitchen. Maya told him about taking over the diner after her mother passed, about the struggle to keep it running when chain restaurants opened nearby, about refusing to cut corners even when times were tight. Roland didn't share much about himself. Part of him wanted to, but another part feared the shift that always came when people learned his name. The next few visits, he began to notice things he hadn't before, The tired lines around her eyes when she thought no one was looking. The way she lingered near the register at the end of the day, scanning receipts like she was doing mental math. One afternoon, as he was finishing his meal, a sudden crash of thunder rattled the windows. Rain poured down in heavy sheets, the kind that made roads slick and dangerous. "Looks like you're stuck for a while," Maya said, glancing at the storm outside. "No sense driving in that. Seems that way." "Come on back," she said, nodding toward the kitchen. "I've got stew on the stove." It felt oddly intimate sitting at the small table tucked in the corner of her kitchen. She ladled out bowls of rich, hearty beef stew, the broth steaming and fragrant. "This is incredible," he said after the first bite. "You say that about everything I make," she teased. "That's because it's true." They talked for hours as the storm raged outside. She told him about the regulars, about Gus, the veteran who refused charity but always accepted pie, about the high school kids who came in after football games. He listened more than he spoke, watching the way her hands moved as she talked, the way her laugh filled the room. At one point, the power flickered and went out entirely. The kitchen was bathed in warm candlelight, and for a moment it felt like the rest of the world had fallen away. Roland wasn't used to this. He wasn't used to feeling present. His life was usually a constant hum of emails, meetings, calls, deadlines. But here with her, he wasn't thinking about any of that. He was thinking about the way the candlelight caught the gold flecks in her eyes, the curve of her smile. When the storm finally passed, he almost didn't want to leave. "Thanks for the stew," he said as she walked him to the door. "Any time," she said. And for a moment he thought she meant it. That night, back in his Manhattan penthouse, Roland found himself staring out over the city again. The skyline was as dazzling as ever, but it felt like a painting. Beautiful, untouchable, cold. In his mind, he saw the diner's warm lights, smelled the peach pie cooling on the counter, heard Maya's laugh, and he realized something unsettling. He didn't just want her cooking anymore. He wanted her. The next time Roland walked into Maya's place, the atmosphere felt different. She wasn't behind the counter. Instead, a young waitress was pouring coffee for the regulars, her smile a little too forced. "Maya's in the back," the waitress said when he asked. "I think she's busy." Roland slid into his usual booth, his stomach tightening. Something was off. A moment later, Maya stepped out from the kitchen, her eyes scanning the diner until they landed on him. She hesitated just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough to tell him she wasn't glad to see him. "Maya," he said, standing. She didn't smile. "Roland Jones," she said, her voice sharper than he'd ever heard it. The use of his full name sent a jolt through him. "You found out. Hard not to, considering your face was plastered across the front of Business Weekly this morning," she said, holding up the glossy magazine. The headline blared, "Roland Jones, the billionaire who owns New York." She dropped it on the counter. "Care to explain why the man who's been sitting in my diner, pretending to be some traveling businessman, is actually worth more than the GDP of this entire county?" He glanced around. A couple of the regulars were openly eavesdropping. "Can we talk somewhere else?" She crossed her arms. "Fine." In the kitchen, away from the customers, she stood with her arms folded, her jaw tight. "You lied to me," she said. "I didn't lie," he said quietly. "I just didn't tell you everything." "That's the same thing." He ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't want you to treat me differently. Everywhere I go, people look at me and see money first. They act like they're talking to a walking bank account. I didn't want that with you." She shook her head. "So you let me think you were just some guy passing through, eating my food because you liked it, not because it was some novelty for you." "It was never a novelty," he said, his voice firm. "Maya, the first time I walked in here, I was used to meals prepared by celebrity chefs and dinners in Manhattan that looked like a painting and tasted like nothing. Then I had your fried chicken, your peach pie. It was the first time in years I felt like I was home. I kept coming back because it wasn't just the food, it was you. You reminded me of something I didn't even realize I'd lost." Her expression softened for just a moment, but she quickly looked away. "You could have told me, and risked losing this?" he asked quietly. "The way you talk to me, the way you laugh with me, the way I can be just a man here, not a headline." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she busied herself wiping the counter. Her movements brisk. "I don't like secrets, Roland, especially when I've been open with you about my life." "I know," he said. "And you're right. I should have told you. "I'm sorry," but he could see the wall had gone up. She wasn't ready to forgive him. Not yet. He left that day without ordering anything. The drive back to the city felt longer than usual. The road stretching endlessly before him. For the next 2 weeks he stayed away, telling himself it was for the best. She deserved someone whose life wasn't splashed across magazine covers, someone without the weight of an empire chained to him, and yet he couldn't stop thinking about her. One rainy afternoon he made a decision. Not the kind that came from a business plan, but the kind that came from the gut. 2 weeks later, Maya walked into her diner to find him there before opening hours. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her brows furrowed. "I came to give you something," he said. She frowned. "Roland, if you think you can buy your way, it's not about buying you," he said. "It's about giving you what you deserve." He handed her a thick envelope. Inside was a deed. Her deed. "I bought the building," he said, "and the land it's on. It's yours now. Free and clear. No more mortgage. No more worrying about property taxes. You never have to think about losing this place." Her eyes widened. "Why would you do that?" "Because this diner belongs to you," he said simply. "To someone who loves it. Someone who feeds people with more than just food. You said your mama taught you that cooking is a way of loving people. Well, you've been doing that for me since the day I walked in." Her voice caught. "Roland, this is... I don't even know what to say." "Say you'll let me stay," he said softly. "Not as Roland Jones, billionaire. Just as Roland, the man who can't stop thinking about the woman who makes the best peach pie in the state." She stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly the tension in her shoulders eased. "You're still a pain for keeping that secret from me," she said, though her lips twitched like she was fighting a smile. "I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you," he said. "That's a long time," she said. "I'm counting on it." That evening, the diner was full again. Locals came in for dinner, the clink of cutlery and low hum of conversation filling the air. Roland sat at the counter wearing a casual shirt instead of his usual tailored suit. He poured coffee for Gus, who accepted it with a gruff nod. When Maya came over, she set a slice of peach pie in front of him. "On the house," she said. "I could get used to that," he said. "Don't push your luck." But she was smiling now, and when he reached for her hand across the counter, she didn't pull away. He took a bite of the pie, savoring the taste. It wasn't just dessert. It was the reason he'd walked into this diner. The reason he'd come back again and again, the reason he was staying. "Your cooking didn't just bring me here," he said, meeting her gaze. "It brought me home." She held his hand a little tighter, and for the first time in a long time, Roland felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The bell above the diner's door jingled as a rush of spring air swept inside. It was Saturday morning, Maya's busiest day, and the place was already humming with chatter, coffee refills, and the faint sizzle of bacon on the griddle. Roland moved easily among the tables now, greeting customers by name, delivering plates, even wiping down booths when the rush came in. The locals had stopped whispering about the billionaire in their midst months ago. To them, he was simply Maya's guy, the man who made coffee a little too strong and always snuck extra whipped cream on the kids' pancakes. From behind the counter, Maya watched him refill Gus's mug without being asked. Gus grunted his thanks, which for him was practically a declaration of love. "You're getting good at this," Maya said when Roland came back behind the counter. "I have an excellent teacher," he said, leaning over to kiss her cheek before reaching for the next plate. The walls of Maya's place now bore more than just framed photos of the town's history. There were snapshots of the two of them laughing in the kitchen, pictures of pie contests they'd entered together and usually won, and a new chalkboard where Roland scribbled the daily specials in messy handwriting that made Maya shake her head. Outside, the sign still read, "Best peach pie in the state," but a smaller sign now hung just beneath it. And the happiest customers, too. As the morning rush slowed, Maya slid a slice of pie across the counter toward Roland. "For you," she said. "You spoil me," he teased, taking a bite. The flavors were the same as the first time. Warm peaches, flaky crust, a hint of cinnamon, but they meant even more now. They tasted like laughter, like late nights talking in the kitchen, like a home he'd finally found. "You know," he said, setting down his fork, "this seat right here at this counter might just be the best view in the world." Maya laughed softly. "Better than Manhattan penthouses." "By 1,000 miles. And with the hum of the diner around them, the scent of coffee and pie in the air, and her hand resting over his. Roland knew he'd never need to search for another view again because he was already home.